Welcome back. Reports can be quite daring, especially if they're 70 pages long and we need to really get someone to decipher them from us. The report I'm talking about is the former ECB chief, Mario Draghi's report on European competitiveness and industrial strategy. And our speaker, Kevin Linehan, I almost called you Mario Draghi, huh? That was Kevin Linehan, who is the director of business creation team at EIT Manufacturing. He was thinking, well, I'm now building this fund for manufacturing scale-ups. And this Draghi report is really building the ground base, and I want to surf this wave. Now, this is interesting. Why would a report build the framework for you? So that's exactly what Kevin will be telling us. So Kevin, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Okay, so my name is Kevin Linehan. I'm Director of Investments at EIT Manufacturing. And as we said in the introduction, I'll talk about the Draghi Report and why it's relevant for European manufacturing investment. And in fact, this investment topic related to manufacturing, we've been thinking about it already in EIT Manufacturing for some time. The Draghi Report just really reinforced a lot of the conclusions that we already had from talking to corporates and investors and startups from around Europe. So first of all, for those who don't know, I'll just give you a little bit of background on who EIT is and who we are in EIT Manufacturing. So EIT was set up about 15 years ago by the European Commission. And within EIT, there's different communities around Europe. There's one for food, one for health, one for mobility. We're the community for manufacturing. And our mission is to support the manufacturing innovation ecosystem in Europe. And we do that. We can support education projects because, as we know, skills are a big issue for manufacturing. We have innovation projects where we can provide funding for consortia. And I'm responsible for the part to do with investing in manufacturing-related startups. We're about 150 people around Europe dedicated to manufacturing innovation. We have a partnership of about 170 members. Our members range from big companies like Volkswagen, Volvo Group, voestalpine, ArcelorMittal, and then we have SMEs, startups, research institutes, universities. And we get our funding mostly from the European Commission through Horizon, but also funding from our members. So as we know, this has been a difficult couple of years for manufacturing. We can see the PMI data. Manufacturing has been in contraction since July 2022. So really tough times. Orders are dropping for manufacturing, purchasing's decreasing, inventories are being cut, and this is due to weak global demand for European goods. And since the pandemic, we've lost 800,000 jobs in manufacturing in Europe, out of a total of about 30 million. And most of these job losses have been in Eastern Europe, with Poland, Czech Republic, the biggest ones, but now we're seeing more and more in Germany, France, eventually Austria, I expect. So tough times for manufacturing. Actually, the most recent data is slightly better, but still difficult times. So in September, this Draghi report was published. I don't know if people are aware of this, but this report is quite a big deal in, let's say, the European institutions. Mario Draghi, as you know, former Prime Minister of Italy, former President of the ECB. He is very close to Ursula von der Leyen. And as you know, there's a new commission being set up in Brussels for the next 5 years, and they're setting priorities for the European Commission. So this report is, let's say, a very key document in setting the European Commission priorities for the coming 5 years. And what does it say in the report? Basically, one of the main things it highlights is this innovation gap we have in Europe versus US and China. And we can see on the left, manufacturing is the data shows Europe is losing share to China. So both in overseas markets, the Chinese are becoming more and more, let's say, taking bigger market share, but also coming here to European markets. So increased competition from China. And we see the US also lost quite some share in manufacturing. But in contrast to Europe, the US has managed to scale up new industries, new innovative companies. If we look at the top R&D spenders from corporates 20 years ago, in US it was automakers, pharma, same as in Europe. 20 years later, the big R&D spenders in the US are Alphabet, Meta, Microsoft, so these digital software companies. In Europe, our big R&D spenders are still automotive. And maybe that wouldn't be such a problem if we had technical leadership in the automotive industry, but while we're still very, very strong, we're somewhat losing our position. So urgent action is required. And the big areas identified in the report were to increase private R&D spending. So as a percentage of GDP, we spend less here in Europe than they do in US. So the report wants to stimulate private investment. More effective use of public R&D spending. In fact, here in Europe, we spend a comparable amount, the same pretty much amount as US does for public funding of R&D, but our programs are very fragmented. There's not a whole lot done as a percentage at European level. There's lots of national programs, and even at European level, there's lots of different funding programs. It can be quite bureaucratic, a little bit burdensome. So we need to reform and make more effective public R&D spending. And Draghi also recommended an increase in that spending and more targeted at strategic technologies. And of course, a big area we have is the fragmentation of the innovation ecosystem. Every country, even within some countries, regions trying to do their own thing around innovation, it just doesn't work in today's world. We need to provide the scale to our manufacturing startups so that they can compete and succeed here in Europe. Another big topic in the report was around energy and decarbonization. And for manufacturing, of course, energy is critical topic. And if we look at the previous chart, the PMI data, when European manufacturers really started to suffer, it was when these energy prices increased a lot due to the, largely due to the Ukraine war. So the report recommends we really, really need to get energy costs down in Europe. And there's ways we can do that. There's a lot to be done in investment in grids, in renewables, in tax, even in market rules, which sometimes are, very burdensome for European consumers and companies. So there's a lot that can be done there. And decarbonization can be a great opportunity for the European manufacturing industry because we do have leadership position in some technology areas. But on the other side, it can also create costs for industry. We know there's new CO2 emission targets coming in 2025 for auto manufacturers. So we need to get this balance. We need to make the transition, but reduce the pain for European manufacturers and maintain and increase our leadership position. So the report recommended a really, let's say, integrated strategy from energy to industry. So there's some technology areas where we're just not competitive, and there's no point in the European taxpayer bearing the burden of ramping up these industries. So we just import the technology from overseas, let overseas governments provide the subsidies. But for strategic technologies, the report recommends to include local content requirements. So for certain components, certain percentage of components, they have to be sourced here in Europe. So this can be a great opportunity for European manufacturers, European scale-up companies to find more business here in Europe. Also, the report recommends to protect infant industries with high growth potential. So for example, next generation technologies for battery, we should protect these companies, help them to grow here in Europe. And another third big topic in the report is about increasing security, reducing dependencies. We see recent years, trade policy interventions. The world is changing, more protectionist. And of course, with the news today, this trend is probably going to get worse, let's say. And Europe has perhaps been a bit behind the game on this. And Europe has a lot of dependencies now on overseas suppliers, as we all know. And I think the report says there's not really a risk of these, let's say, supplies being cut off from one day to the next, but it's more, it creates opportunities for overseas countries to put pressure on Europe and use these dependencies as a geopolitical weapon. So it's not a comfortable position, and Europe needs to invest in a coordinated strategy to develop things like critical raw materials, semiconductors, defense, space. And again, with the recent news, probably defense will be a huge area of investment in Europe. And again, for European manufacturers, this could be a good business opportunity. But becoming more independent, for sure, is going to create costs, but we need a coordinated European approach to manage these costs. So the major recommendations, increased around financing, increased annual investment, 750 billion per year. So huge sums of money. Big recommendation. They've been talking about the Capital Markets Union, Banking Union for many, many years. This has to happen, supported by pension funds and savings. And also European research, public money should be increased and simplified and targeted at breakthrough innovation. As I mentioned before, in Europe, we do spend quite a lot of money, public money, on R&D, but we have to do it in a smarter, simpler way. And maybe even more importantly is to reduce this regulation and fragmentation. I mean, we all know Europe was a leader in GDPR, in AI regulation, but we have to ask ourselves, has that really helped our technology companies to scale? And at the end of the day, we know that there's not a whole lot of VC investment in Europe compared to US, but what's the problem? Why are the VCs not investing here in Europe? Why are companies not scaling in Europe? I think it's because of this fragmentation. So I think reducing the regulatory burden, decreasing fragmentation, giving opportunities for companies to scale here in Europe, then the financing will follow. So the report talks about reducing reporting obligations by 25% with a goal of 50% reduction for SMEs. So we could see real urgent action here in Brussels to start cutting regulations. And we have enormous advantages here in Europe. As you know, we're leading the green transition. Last year, Europe reduced CO2 emissions by 8%, which is totally amazing and super. This is a long-term problem for the world. It's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. Europe is leading the world in this. And we have stable and attractive environment here in Europe. So if you look at rule of law, 8 of the top 10 companies in our countries in the world for strength of rule of law are European Union countries. And that, in an unstable world, this is very valuable. We have longer lifespans, less infant mortality. We've got a lot of advantages here in Europe. And at the center of it is our people, of course. So we have a well-educated workforce. If we talk about tech salaries, they're cheaper here in Europe than they are in the US. And we see, trends of people where they want to work. Many people, engineers, are now coming from US to Europe, and less moving from Europe to US. So our people is a huge advantage for us. Like part of my job, which I love, is talking to these amazing founders we have around Europe. And we have so many early stage companies now in Europe, more than in US. Many of these companies operating in deep tech sectors, which are so critical for manufacturing. things like hydrogen, industrial technology, semiconductors, advanced materials. We've got a whole bunch of amazing early stage companies. But of course, the challenge is getting financing to these companies so that we can harvest, let's say, what we've developed over recent years. So we know there's much more access to finance in Europe or in US. We need to make sure that when these companies go for the next funding round or go to exit, we keep this IP in Europe and grow these companies in Europe. So EIT Manufacturing, we invest. We can invest up to 500,000, so quite early stage. The areas we look at are around automation technology, AI, robotics, because our manufacturing has to be as efficient as possible. We look at critical components and materials related to manufacturing, things like advanced materials, additive manufacturing, semiconductors, and technologies related to energy transition, so renewables, energy storage, carbon capture. And some examples of great companies we've invested in, DTE from Iceland. They do real-time composition analysis of molten metals. Stillfold from Sweden. They do industrial origami, so they can take a piece of metal and fold it into a shape required to produce a product. So in a much more efficient way than bolting together many different pieces of metal. And Anticon, a recent investment from Germany, which provides diamond coatings, allowing components to last much longer, increasing sustainability and efficiency. So we have a huge pipeline of investments that we're processing. So this is very exciting for us in EIT Manufacturing, but we know, as I mentioned, we have a huge problem in Europe in scaling up investment, or scaling up our startups. So EIT Manufacturing is in discussion with EIF to create a fund of funds. The idea is to bring in manufacturing corporates, CVCs, or corporates without CVC to invest in this fund. The corporates will, let's say, provide the smart money, because especially in deep tech and manufacturing topics, it's a very long and difficult road to get to market. And having corporates on board as investors or partners can make a huge difference. It can help address this problem of product market fit that we've had in the past. So this fund is under discussion. We'll hopefully have some public money from European corporates, and we hope to launch in the first half of next year. So basically, if you're an investor, if you have early stage companies that are looking for funding, please send them to us in EIT Manufacturing. If you're looking to get access to fund of funds, looking at scale-up technologies, if you're a corporate and want some deal flow, want M&A opportunities, please talk to us in EIT Manufacturing. We have a team here in Vienna, our investment team, who are here today, so I hope to talk more with you later. Thank you.